Hello, this is Kara from AMACO, and welcome to Celadon Glazing Part 1. So last week I talked about ancient copper, and this is what came out of the kiln. So I had PC56 ancient copper on the top half and SM29 blue-green on the bottom half. And you can see it came out really nice. You can still see some of the texture. I didn't really have any overlap. It was very, very small because where the ancient copper runs over the blue-green, it kind of goes a little greenish, and I wanted to keep as much of the copper as possible. So for those who are asking, this was 3 coats and 3 coats. And this was fired to cone 6, medium speed, no hold. So nice result. So today I wanted to talk about the Celadons and the Celadon line of glazes. And this is a layered example of the Celadons. The Celadon glazes were first developed to imitate traditional Asian Celadons, East Asian Celadon glazes, and so they pool where there's texture, they're slightly translucent, and so they work best on a textured surface, but they also show underglazes. Can you see what I'm pointing at here? Texture. This is slip trailing, underglaze, carving, and a combination of carving and water etching. This is Celadon Glacier, and so the Celadons, they're very stiff. They are not runny, so you don't have to worry about them flowing down off the bottom of your pot or sticking to the kiln shelf. As long as you don't have glaze on the foot, they're not going to run. They're quite stiff by themselves. They're a fully mixable line, so they all have the same base formula, but different colorants, so you can mix them and it doesn't really change the chemistry, it just changes the color. So the things that Celadons, they've become really popular because we have a beautiful selection of colors, and they're very reliable glazes, and they do some really beautiful things. What they work best for is they're meant to go on light colored or white clay, and they're meant to go on texture. So it can be difficult to get an even coat if they are on a smooth surface. And if you're not using a white clay body, if you're using a buff or a dark clay body, they don't show the color really well. These are not opaque glazes, so if you're wanting something that's going to be really bright on a dark colored clay, your best bet is to look at our HF line, or the Celebration line. The HF glazes are more opaque and they're meant for darker clay bodies. The PCs also work well on buff clay bodies, but the Celadons, they look nice on speckled clay, but they're not going to be as bright of a color. So if you're looking for like a really crisp yellow, and you're using marigold, you're going to need to use it on a white clay body to get the expected results. So again, this is Glacier. Very nice. So I do hear occasionally where people are having difficulty with the Celadons because they're coming out blotchy. The application can make a difference. So this is an example of layering. I like to use a lot of texture on my pottery. So this is a hand-built mug with lots and lots of texture, and I used the smoke as the base glaze, and then did a stripe around the center of lustrous jade. So that's the color that you see there. And what you see here is just 3 coats of smoke on a white clay body on a very textured surface. So it really brings the texture out. You can see all the details of the texture tools that I used on here. And then I used the mixing clear as the liner, and so I don't have to worry about where they meet. There's no interaction because the 2 glazes have the same base. So there's lots of things that you can do to make the colors pop. Some of the colors are more translucent than others. So this is aqua over the V370 velvet underglaze, velour black. So you can see that the aqua shows the underglaze just fine, but some of the colors, like obsidian is very opaque. So if you're wanting something that's dark and you're wanting to put it over underglazes, you're better off with something like the smoke instead of obsidian. Obsidian's going to cover up everything. However, like I said, it looks great on texture. So, for example, we have textured tiles that we can glaze. And what I did here is actually you can actually use the obsidian like a stain. So I'm using obsidian to make the texture show up even more. So I just brush 1 coat of obsidian on my tile, and then I'm going to let that dry. And this is kind of like a cooking show. And I have this one that's ready. This is already dried. And I take a wet sponge, not too wet, just wet enough, and sponge it off. Set that one aside. And this one has already been sponged off and is nice and dry, so I can apply the C40 Aqua. So I get asked this in each of the demos. These fan brushes are on our website, amaco.com. Go under Tools, under Glaze Tools, and you will find brushes, and these are the Fitch fan brushes. This is a size 4. And just like when applying the PCs, I just kind of float it on. Don't let the brush get dry. And make sure it gets into all of the little crevices. If you see like a little hole popping up, I don't know if you can see, there's a couple tiny, tiny little holes that are popping up. Those will not fill in. If the glaze doesn't flow in there because of the surface tension of the glaze, it will still be a hole after it's fired. So I try to make sure that the glaze goes into all of the little holes. There we go. So I'll set that aside. That's 1 coat. Now, Celadons, as I said, they're great for texture. I have a bisque vase here that has texture on it, but it also has a lot of flat surface area. So to get as even a coat as possible, I can use a bigger fan brush. You see how that's dragging? I don't want it to drag. But you see how I'm overlapping? You'll notice I don't wax the bottoms. I generally just sponge the bottom off. some people like to pour the glaze on and kind of mop it around, and that works great. Might be a little difficult on a vase form, but it works really well. So overlapping, soft brush that holds a lot of glaze. And making sure that you get any spots where the glaze is not sinking in to the clay. You can also put this on a turntable if that is easier. Kind of hard to get into the bottom when I'm doing this as a demo. Bring that closer. So I'm not as worried about the evenness on the inside, but the trick is just to go back over . So that is part 1 today. So as I said, the Celadons work best on a light or white clay body. They work best on texture. You can put them on smooth surfaces, but they really like and are meant for textured surfaces. And use a soft, long bristle brush to get the best even application. So I'll be back at 12:30 for the second part, and I think I'm going to talk a little bit about mixing when we get to that, as well as some other things. So I will see you guys at 12:30, and if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. I see that there are a couple questions already, but it's hard for me to read them from this angle, so I will answer questions in the next segment. Talk to you guys in about an hour. Thanks.